Good morning, Matt. I'm Chris Frostad, President and CEO of Purepoint Uranium Group Inc., and we are a exploration company, uranium exploration company operating out of northern Saskatchewan. And we have a dozen projects up there that are all being actively advanced and have a lot of drilling to do in the next little while.
You do. You're in the right part of the world, apparently. High grade everywhere. We're going to talk about some of that in a second. But first, I want to speak to you. Base shelf prospectus out today. Why now? What's it going to do for you?
Well, we've actually been looking at this for a while. When the markets do get active, and particularly in this, in the uranium space, as we've seen even in the last week, you want to be able to take advantage of that when you can. And part of the approach in the last year or so is to get as much work done as we can while the money's available. And we want to make sure that money's coming in, at the most appropriate price and timing and whatnot. So by getting that base shelf up there, it allows us over the next couple of years to raise money leaning on it. And it kind of removes the need for a 4-month hold. It removes the need to be an accredited investor. And it allows brokers and dealers to help us raise money much easier.
So tell me about this. But again, for people looking in, perhaps don't understand, how money is raised in North America or Canada specifically. Why aren't more companies going for this mechanism? Why private placements? Why raising equity in the market? Why ATMs?
Well, it's not a quick hit. So I mean, the way it operates in Canada under the securities rules is that you cannot issue shares to the public unless you put together a prospectus. That's the overriding rule. Now, because in the resource industry, we're raising money every hour and a half, that would get to be a little bit onerous. So we typically would operate under an exemption that allows us to issue shares, but only to an accredited investor who has ticked all the boxes of being have the experience and financial knowledge to manage that risk, and it places a 4-month hold on that stock. So it's all the way that they protect the investor outside of a prospectus. The base shelf is another mechanism kind of up from that, where again, if we were to raise money, we already have a prospectus sitting there, and we do it once. And any private placements we do moving forward would reference that prospectus for the next little while. So it means that we can sell to the retail. It can be sold directly to retail, and it just opens up the market and the flexibility we have.
Okay, but what are your plans for the money? Because why don't we get onto the high grading stuff?
Well, we haven't, and to quickly answer that question, we don't, we're not raising money tomorrow necessarily, right? This is just in place for us over the next few years to make sure that when we do make that call, we'll have that available to us.
Right. It'll be available to you, and I guess we need to work towards what end? Okay, so obviously you've got your kind of, and I don't want to talk about them today in terms of the Cameco Orano JVs going on. Maybe we'll touch upon them at the end. I want to focus on what you've been doing, because I note things like your neighbors, ISO Energy. Some nice headlines coming out there. That's got to be encouraging for you, but you've got to do some work first to be able to do something similar, don't you?
That's right. And I think, the fact that we have a large pipeline, as I mentioned, we've got 12 projects, and, we want to make sure that we're moving them all along properly, that we're prioritizing them properly, making them available, even if we take on partners and such, that they're all ready to advance in that way. And so as we're in a period of availability of capital to move these things aggressively, we want to make sure that we're doing that and able to work all the projects that we need to do. So when ISO Energy next door to us up at Turnor Lake all of a sudden comes up with a 50 million pound resource at 35%, which is unheard of on a piece of property that Cameco worked for years, right on our doorstep, it's very encouraging to know that, again, this, these deposits can and will be all over the place and will take on many different shapes and forms.
I mean, so just talk about that. I mean, talk about, you say it's exceptional, but I mean, truly exceptional grading there. I mean, put it in context for us in terms of how good that is when you compare it to things
Well, how
like, say,
good it is.
NextGen
I mean,
or someone else.
It's the highest grade deposit ever, probably right now. And it's just shy of 50 million pounds at, I think it's 34.5%. So if let's compare that, say, to NextGen. So NextGen's resource is 250 million pounds, so 5 times as much, but it's at 3.1%. So the actual space and size, like if you just took 50 million pounds of NextGen's deposit, ISO's is 1/12 the size because it's such a high grade, which makes it even harder to find. These things are not.
You're talking about 1/12 the size amount of ore that you're needing to move. Is that what you're saying?
Right, the amount of rock you have to move to get it out. So when you start trying to drill off a deposit, they're drilling off something this big. NextGen's been drilling, had to do a lot more drilling. To come up with it, to come up with the deposit that they wanted to come up with.
So it's extraordinary. So it's obviously cheaper to drill out to find that. It's going to be cheaper to actually extract it. So that the margins are going to be exceptional. So, okay, that's why I say
it's harder to find.
It's harder to find. Obviously harder to find. But I'm trying to work out what does that do to your thinking when, you've got to kind of, you always have this portfolio approach, you've got the JV partners off on the side, which will come to you. Does it change the order of play for you, or is it business as usual?
To some degree, it certainly has to, right? And again, I've said this before, we're not just, reprioritizing within a project, we're reprioritizing within projects. So in September, earlier this year, when we drilled at Red Willow, and we ran into this like close to a mile of uranium, all of a sudden it became a priority. And so we were planning on drilling Turnor Lake in September, but we said, okay, wait a minute, we better get back and do a little more work at Red Willow. Then all of a sudden, ISO comes up with this monster. Well, okay, maybe we better figure out how to do both.
Yeah.
and so that's happening. So yeah, it definitely affects us what goes on next door.
Right, but what you don't want to be accused of is flitting and jumping around from piece to piece. No. So this is based on data. Positive data, not a case of it ain't working here, we need to jump somewhere else. So, right, okay. So when you go and talk to the market, about whether about base shelf prospectus or not, do you feel the reception is going to be better as a result of this, or is that just back to neurology and
what it means is, we've got all the funds we need to for this year and for all the drilling we're talking about in September. We can get out there and drill Red Willow. And, again, it's more than even just the money. It's have you got the drill crew lined up and how are they going to be there and the helicopter lined up, et cetera. So absolutely, we can get out there and we can do those projects and get them drilled. And then based on what we see, I can't tell you what we're going to do in January because we have to see what comes out of the ground in September and October, and then see what's going to happen out at out at Hook Lake this coming year as well. So I can't sit back and tell you what I'm going to do for the next 5 years because this is exploration, and we have to go where the indicators lead us. And when most of the holes in the basin that are drilled come up with that much uranium, let alone a sniff, you really do have to follow up on everything because you never know when you're going to run into, another hurricane zone.
Right. So, but how do you play this, right? So you're 30 million market cap, right? So share price roughly where it is when I spoke to you last. I guess the uranium market is seeing a little bit of a revival in the last week. Should we try not to judge markets and theses on a week's news? But there's been a staggering amount of positive news from, and I take this in the right way. COVID has been good for uranium in terms of supply. Kazakhstan production numbers have been good for uranium. Even Russia, Ukraine situation has been good for uranium. But you've got to work out how you play that environment as a small company at this stage, because the producers will be able to take advantage of it. The developers will take advantage of it. So
I think I've shown you the graphs before, but I think what we've found is we've been able to ride the average. So, we're all riding on that roller coaster of up and down, depending on what the market determines for us. And that's all lovely. And it happens to be, we happen to be careening towards the top right now. But in order to break away from that, you actually have to find something. You have to, make a real discovery. And when I talk about a discovery, I mean, I don't know how you talk about a discovery other than in hindsight. Because it's only after you've got a deposit or something can you go back and say, okay, this was the first hole that we put in that thing. But the only way you're going to break away from the average and quit riding whatever the market is going to give you is by making a discovery. And as we've said time and time again, this is not a cheap endeavor we're into, and it's not a Hail Mary or a one-trick pony. So you have to constantly be looking where to put that next hole. Every hole you put in the ground is hopeful of being the next one.
Yeah, but one hole does not a discovery make, right?
One hole does not a discovery make.
Right. So there's
time and time again.
We be surprised how many companies come on here and tell me they've made a discovery.
Well, you want to call it that. I mean, you can discover. I mean, I've discovered the bald spot in the back of my head too. But I mean, it's you can call anything a discovery.
Right.
Sure.
I wish they wouldn't though. I say hindsight's much
I think we've been guilty of that from time to time too. So
Well, look. So let's talk about that money then. You say you've got enough money for both Red Willow and also Turnor Lake, which is great. But what does that actually mean in dollars, meters, and time?
Well, I would think again we're going to start drilling. It looks like it's going to be a little later in September now because of the timing of our cruise. So we'll start drilling near the end of September at Red Willow, and if the weather holds out and the crews are good, we're not going to do a lot this time around because it's still wet out there and it's a helicopter job and it's an expensive way to drill and you can't move around as much. So what we want to do is just follow up kind of where we left off. Because we seem to be coming into something. And then we do want to go up because we've got an area at Turnor Lake that we've never drilled. And it's the one that's right on trend with ISO. And it's got the trap and all the good stuff that we like to see. But until you've actually poked a hole in it, you don't know what you're looking at. So we do want to get up and work on that as well. So depending on what we find there on those two projects, we'll then determine what happens this coming winter.
Right, and you're going to, in terms of the drill targeting, that's based on what? I noticed that you've done some airborne gravity and mag survey work earlier in June. What else are you using? Well, sorry, tell us a bit about that and tell us about the targeting, please. Sure.
So, I mean, the targeting on Red Willow is quite simple. Actually, can I pull something up? I'll show you.
Yeah, go for it. Let me just see. I think you are connected.
Okay. So this is, I mean, what you see on the right there, that gray line is graphite in the basement rock, which again is our primary target area. And when we started drilling at Red Willow last winter, we were starting down here in this heel where we had picked up a sizable lens of uranium. And so we started chasing that to the north, and we went out about 50 meters because these deposits usually aren't much bigger than 100 meters in width. And we hit the same thing again. And so we did a bit of a Hail Mary and we moved out 300 meters to see what it looked like on the other side. And we hit the same thing again, and then 300 meters and then 300 meters. So we've been following this what turns into a consistent trail of uranium. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that you would mine what we're drilling into. But there's obviously been quite a sizable mineralization event across this region, and we're looking for where the deposit might would have formed itself. And we've got about another 1.5 kilometers to the north of this thing where we last left off, another kilometer to the south. So we want to go up here where we left off. There's another 300 meters out. We were starting to run into the alteration and the structure that we like to see, and just see where that's going to take us. And from that, we'll sort of plan out our next program. As far as Turnor Lake goes, I mean, it's this is it here. And
what are the red lines? Sorry, what are the red lines?
So the red lines, again, this is graphite in the basement rock.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the first indicator you go looking for when you're looking for uranium up there. And it's an easy thing to identify through geophysics. And it's along this western edge. You see this big S-shaped, it's a granitic dome in the center here, and you can see all those red lines all wrap around it. like somebody stuck their hand in the middle of it and gave it a twist. And it's along this western edge that a lot of these things have been found. The Rock here, which is Cameco's, was 30% over 7 meters. And then up here, we've got ISO's hurricane zone, but it continues right along to the north of our project here. And there's been other uranium found around the area. So we do want to get up here to the north and test the continuation of that corridor, mainly stemming from a seismic line that SMDC, which is now Cameco, did back in 1985. And there's this significant fault right where it crosses our conductor there. And that's kind of what we want to test, because it's a similar setting as you would have seen at Key Lake or MacArthur. It's not an unfamiliar setting for deposits. So we want to get up there and see what's going on up there. So that's the drilling we want to do this fall. And it's based on what we see out of that, we will then determine what we want to do in the winter. And we talked about flow through financing before and how that works for us. And so, we want to, there's a timing element of it. You can't over raise. But we do want to see what our needs will be and determine what that will be and raise accordingly. And again, back to the base shelf prospectus, that will allow us to hopefully do that in short order and at a appropriate pricing level. The other work we've been doing all summer since we last spoke is really a lot of geophysics, airborne geophysics over a number of the projects. And the objective there was really to get them to a drill ready state, right? We want all of these things ready to take a drill, be it for, taking on partners or drilling them ourselves. And so these three projects, well, all of these projects to the south were flown this summer. We're just waiting back on the results of that, and up here to the north, it's pretty much done. But a lot of the interpretation work isn't done. And then, of course, we were doing geophysical work over Hook Lake this summer as well, in anticipation of getting back out there with a drill.
When I look at this space at the moment, it's been a fun ride for the last 3-4 years, or quite frankly 10 years since I've been involved with it. But
the first 8 weren't fun. No.
Well, it's fun as an observer, because it was so dynamic in terms of the geopolitics of it all. But right now, I'm looking at the market starting to behave, or the beginnings of how it started to behave last cycle, where it just got a little bit crazy. Right. We had some great projects, some great companies, some great management teams, and then a whole bunch of 450 other companies trying to do the same thing. And it became a bit messy. We're starting to see that inflow, new companies coming through. It's going to be distracting. A lot of white noise, a lot of money going where it shouldn't, instead of where it should. We've also seen a lot of M&A happen recently. Obviously, the big one recently is UEC, UEX. And Denison involved for a little bit of that conversation, but that seems to be the way this is going, and I can name others where M&A is starting to happen, new entrants starting to happen. Mm-hmm. What's the best way for you as a management team, for your shareholders, to take advantage of the current emerging scene in uranium again? Because it's starting to get a little bit hot. I don't want to sound like one of those sort of social media pumpers here, but it's starting to catch the eye. So how do you play it?
Right. Well, once we know that the news media is picking it up a lot now, so people are paying a little more attention to it. They're understanding it more. It certainly has the green benefit these days, whereby it's now a solution, and that's really taken off. And so, I think more than anything, it helps to educate the market on nuclear in general. And then it always comes back to where's the uranium? And, and that's when it starts to get a little bit messy. From our perspective, we can float along here all day with the market, but things are not going to change until we make a discovery. And, and we know, the way you do that is you have to drill. You have to drill a lot. You have to follow up on things. And it's not a Hail Mary. And, I tell you, the ISO was doing a lot of drilling on a lot of projects before they hit hurricane. And and that's the approach we're taking. So we want to make sure that while this period of awareness is out there, and the money is available, because people are interested at this point in time, that we maximize our use of that money to truly differentiate ourselves through a discovery. Otherwise, what are you here for?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so there's basically Red Willow, Turnor Lake. There's a full winter drill program. You'll know more. You make some decisions at the point you understand what it is that the drilling has told you, right? And money wise, a bit of flow through at end of would you say it would be end of year? Or was that usually typically in the new year?
Typically, we would be raising flow through by the end of the year, but
right, okay.
It seems to be available throughout the year these days, more so than one would think.
It does, doesn't it? Gone is another metric of mine. Damn it! Right,
people aren't going away in May anymore. What happened to that?
I know, man. We're going to have to come up with a whole bunch of other euphemisms and phrases of our own. Let's go back to Cameco and Orano with what they're up to, because obviously it's just. They've got their own pace. They've got their own agenda. Doesn't necessarily going to suit you all of the time, but when it does go, it's quite useful. So, what are they doing?
Well, I think that what we saw during the last down cycle certainly was we were witness to the pain they were suffering along with us. I mean, it's not like all the little juniors that got blown up were the only ones devastated here, but they've had a rough go of it, and we've seen a lot of their exploration budget and dollars vaporize over the last 10 years. So from our perspective, where they were only putting, they were being very, very precise as to where money was going and how it was affecting their budgets. I think, I hope, and again, we haven't had the conversation with them yet for this year, for this coming year. They've got our proposals. We're waiting for some of the data to come back in on the work that we just did. But over the next couple of months, we'll get a budget out of them and see how much work we'll be able to do in January. But we certainly get a sense that things are a lot better over there as well. I mean, they reduced themselves a few times over the last 10 years, and drastically so. And now, there's more money available for them to ramp things back up again and get things going. So I don't have a quick answer for you because we don't talk every day with them, but we will know over the next month or two as we make these proposals for the new year. I mean, we're proposing I think $1.92 million. Of maybe a month and a half's worth of drilling in the winter, this coming winter, which we think is a reasonable amount to start testing that. We're over in a new corridor now that we're testing. I think I spoke about that last time, and again, they like to pace us, and they like us to do a little work and then really digest it well before we go out and gather more data. So we'll see how that moves along.
Okay, so if I look at the share charts for uranium companies, it broadly follows what's happening with regards to spot market typically, and what Sput's doing typically. There was those little bumps. So everyone's following that same pattern. But for you, again, as a small exploration company with a portfolio approach stuff, and you've got your JV partners, you've got to have a view on what the market's going to do. And I'm gonna ask you, because everyone's got an opinion, and I don't know who's going to be right at the end of all of this, but given okay, most recently we've had the Japanese announcements all across Europe about nuclear taxonomy. It's a green energy, as you've mentioned in there. We've had Kazakhstan, we've had all sorts of supply constraint issues. Everyone's feeling good, but it seems to work on a different set of rules. So what's your take on the rest of this year, next, timing, and how it affects you?
Well, again, this has been said before. I mean, if, for uranium to go from $25 to $35, it might as well not have moved at all, because it doesn't really move the needle in terms of opening up mines, new mines, opening up mines that have been put on maintenance, et cetera, or increasing production. So, right now, when we're looking at a fairly flat price of uranium, both long-term and spot in and around the $50 mark, we're still $20 shy of a tipping point. And so I think as the market, we can see, we've been mapping the move in share prices compared to the movement in the price of uranium. And the market always likes to anticipate this stuff and get ahead of it. And every time it sees a wiggle, it will shoot. And we've seen that happen a few times over the last couple of years. So I think, and then as it plateaus, the price of uranium, the market gets a little tired of it and things kind of drift off a bit. So I think right now we're coming into a cycle where hopefully we're going to see the price of uranium maybe twitch a bit or something that will get the markets excited, and we will probably see a lot more money coming into the equities before the end of the year. I think it's going to be another probably year or so before we see the price of uranium though get up to where it needs to be to really make an impact on the industry itself. Forget the equities in the uranium business, and so between now and then, the markets are going to continuously try and anticipate, a big move and jump in. So it's pretty twitchy. It's going to be pretty volatile, I think. If one thing we've proven is our stock has managed not to be as volatile as a lot of the others. I think a lot of that has to do with our relationship with some of the majors. But it's going to be a volatile time. Every time the markets twitch, every time there's news like Japan, well, we've seen it. The market, they react to Japan announcing more reactors. That's a good thing, and I think that's the kind of stuff we're going to see.
It's a kind of good thing, right? It's like, I think Rick Rule has been talking about that for the last 4 years. But I'm not sure it's entire. Well, more, yeah, 10. But it's not entirely down to Japan. They're just in a long line sequence of events and announcements that are made. Obviously, this is a fairly one established in folklore, but I think the truth of the situation is that the whole market's been building in terms of the demand side. The supply side is just waiting to be recompensed the right way. So twitchy, volatile, however you want to look at it. Exciting times for the next 6 months for sure.
But it's heading in the right direcation constantly.
For sure.
As twitchy as it is.
Yep.
And and again, to your point, I think Japan is a bit of a red herring because when, it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back in 2011, they shut down 10% of the world's reactors. But in the meantime, Kazakhstan had so flooded the market, if you will, with low cost uranium. That was really the problem. Yeah. And, by 2015, the amount of reactors that Japan had shut down had been replaced with other reactors around the world. So
it's not 10% anymore.
So I think Japan has turned into a bit of a bellwether that's stuck in people's heads that this is a good thing. But there's a lot of good things going on. I mean, Switzerland just broke their moratorium on reactors, and so it's coming back around, and Germany's still fighting over the last 3. So it's all good news from, I think, the reactor end of the process, and all of that washes back on us. I think gives us a better playing field to do what we need to do. I think over the next couple of years, this is we got to get a lot of work, as much work as we can done over the next year or two, to really take advantage of a returning market and a balance in the uranium prices.
And Russia's still building reactors for people as well, I note in the press. Hey, well, look, Chris, great catching up with you as ever. I'm glad things are moving along. It looks like the shoring up the financial options as well is helpful. But like you say, at the end of the day, drill, make that discovery, right?
Always. That's how you find it. Thanks a lot, Matt.